Picture a house made of money. Not a metaphor. An actual house where the ceilings were painted by men brought over from Italy, where the staircase is carved from a single mountain's worth of Caen stone, where the doorknobs are gilded bronze and the bathtub is cut from one solid block of marble. Now fill it with a 17-year-old girl who's not allowed to choose what she eats for breakfast. Add a mother who reads her diary, a father who is never home, a corset that leaves purple grooves in her skin by noon, and a price tag hanging invisibly around her neck that every man in New York can read from across a ballroom. That's Fifth Avenue in 1895, the richest street in the richest city in the fastest growing country on earth. A place where a girl could own more wealth than a European nation and still not own the right to walk to the corner alone. We're going back there tonight, not as tourists gawking at the mansions. We're living it. One girl, one season, one marriage. Everything she would have felt, worn, feared, and lost. So, I make these history stories, and honestly, I still don't know if anyone actually sleeps to them, or if you're all just lying in the dark wondering what it felt like to be sold to a duke for $2.5 million. Either way, subscribe if you want. Get comfortable. Here we go. The corset comes first. Before breakfast, before daylight has properly settled on the avenue, before you have said a single word out loud, there are hands at your waist and a knee braced against the small of your back. Breathe out, miss. You breathe out. The maid pulls. The whalebone closes around your ribs like a hand closing around a bird, and somewhere in the middle of your body something shifts, compresses, gives up its space. You have done this every morning since you were 14. It does not get easier. That is a lie people tell. What happens is that you forget what full breath felt like. The way you forget a language you stopped speaking. Your name is Eleanor Rutherford Crane. Everyone who's allowed to be familiar with you, which is almost no one, calls you Nell. You're 17 years old, and this morning in your bedroom on the second floor of a limestone palace at 5th Avenue and 64th Street, you're being prepared the way a jeweller prepares a stone for sale. Cleaned, polished, set. Because tonight is the Hartley's ball, and at the Hartley's ball there will be an Englishman, an actual duke, and your mother has already decided for months, maybe years, in some sealed chamber of her mind you have never been permitted to enter, that you're going to marry him. Nobody has asked you. Nobody is going to. The maid ties off the laces. You put your hand flat against your stomach and feel the ridges of bone through the silk. 19 inches. Your mother measured last week with a tape she keeps in her escritoire, and she said 19 the way other mothers say a daughter's name. Down in the street, 4 floors below the frost-fogged window, a coal cart is grinding past, iron tyres on Belgian block, and a man is shouting at his horse, and the horse doesn't care, and somewhere further down the avenue a church bell is counting out 8. You press your forehead against the cold glass for 1 second. 1. Before the maid clears her throat, because even that is not done, miss. You'll mark the pain. You're one of the richest girls in America. You've not touched money in your life. You wouldn't know how to buy a train ticket. You've never been alone in a room with a boy, never been alone on a street, never been alone at all. In fact, except in bed at night, and even then the door has no lock, because your mother had the lock removed when you were 15, and she found the novel under your mattress. Welcome to the Gilded Age. Gilded, mind you, not golden. Gilded means a thin layer of gold over something cheaper. Mark Twain named it that, and he meant it as an insult, and everyone was too busy building marble houses to notice. Your father is Augustus Crane. He controls 11,000 miles of railroad track, 3 steamship lines, and a block of Manhattan real estate that generates more rent in a month than a schoolteacher earns in 6 lifetimes. You have seen him at dinner perhaps twice this week. He looks at you the way a man looks at a certificate of deposit, fondly, abstractly, as a thing that will mature. Your mother is Cornelia Crane, born Cornelia Slade of nowhere in particular, which is precisely the problem and the engine of everything that is about to happen to you. Because in New York in 1895 there is money and there is society, and they are not the same thing, and the difference between them is a wall higher and colder than anything on Fifth Avenue. Here is what you must understand about this world before we go one step further. The old families, the Astors, the Van Rensselaers, the ones whose money is 3 generations deep and therefore invisible, odourless, sanctified, they keep a list, not a figurative list, a literal one. 400 names, the number of people who fit comfortably into Mrs. Astor's ballroom, and therefore, by the logic of this city, the number of people who exist. If you are on the list, you are in society. If you are not, you are merely rich, and merely rich is a kind of leprosy on this avenue. Your mother has spent 20 years and roughly 4 million of your father's dollars trying to get on that list, and the wall has not moved 1 inch. But there is a door in the wall. There has always been one door, a title. Because Mrs. Astor cannot snub a duchess. Nobody can snub a duchess. A duchess outranks every woman in America by definition, the way a king outranks a president at a dinner table. And across the ocean, at this exact moment in history, there are dozens of English lords sitting in enormous freezing houses they can no longer afford, watching the agricultural income that sustained their families for 400 years collapse under a flood of cheap American wheat in some cases carried on your father's own railroads. Their roofs leak, their farms lose money, their debts compound. They need cash. Your mother needs rank. And you, Nell, you are the coin. They even have a name for girls like you. The newspapers coined it, the way newspapers coin everything. Dollar princesses. There are dozens of you now, shipped east across the Atlantic like grain going the other way. Jenny Jerome went and got a lord and produced a son named Winston. Consuelo Isnaga went and became a duchess. Every one of them was toasted, photographed, envied, and every one of them, once the wedding was over and the cheque had cleared, discovered the same thing at the bottom of the bargain. But you don't know that part yet. Nobody tells you that part. Right now you know only this. The corset is laced, the morning is cold, and downstairs your mother is waiting, and when your mother waits, the whole house holds its breath. The dress for morning is dove grey faille with jet buttons from throat to waist, 22 of them, and the maid does every one, because your arms, laced as you are, cannot reach behind your own back. Think about that for a moment. You cannot dress yourself. You cannot undress yourself. A girl of your class is physically constructed every single day into a shape that requires servants to enter and exit. That is not an accident of fashion. That is the point of it. Helplessness is the proof of wealth. Your soft, useless, beautiful hands are your father's advertisement. Your hair takes 40 minutes. The maid, her name is Bridget. She's 19. 2 years older than you. She crossed from County Mayo in the hold of a ship and now sleeps in a room under the roof that freezes in January and cooks in July. Bridget heats the iron on a spirit lamp, tests it against paper, and rolls your hair section by section while you sit perfectly still and smell the faint singe of it, that dry hot smell like a struck match held too long. If she burns you, she loses her place. She has never burned you. Her hands are chapped red to the wrist from washing, and yours have never washed anything, and neither of you has ever once remarked on this, though you have both noticed it 1,000 times. You like Brigid. You are not allowed to like Brigid. Familiarity with servants, your mother says, is how a family announces that it was recently poor. Breakfast is taken in the small dining room, which is called small because it seats only 12. The walls are hung with silk the colour of pigeon's blood. The chocolate comes in a Sèvres pot with a crest on it that belonged to a French comte before the Revolution relieved him of his crockery and eventually his head. You drink from a dead aristocrat's cup every morning. In this house, Europe is something you buy by the crate. Your mother is already seated, back straight as a fire iron, grey silk, and in front of her, laid flat beside her plate like a general's map, this morning's Town Topics. Town Topics. Remember that name. It is a gossip paper, the most feared publication in New York, run by a silver-bearded blackmailer named Colonel Mann, who sells the rich two things, flattery and silence about what he knows. Every family on this avenue pays him. Every family reads him. Your mother reads him the way a sailor reads the sky. The Duke of Rexford, she says, without good morning, without looking up, arrived Tuesday on the Lucania. He is staying with the Hartleys. He will be at the ball tonight. A pause, the turning of a page. He danced twice with Florence Ryder at Newport in August. You understand every layer of this sentence because you have been trained to, the way a hunting dog understands a whistle. Florence Ryder is 17, blonde, and worth... The figure is common knowledge. Everyone's figure is common knowledge. The newspapers print them like racing odds. About 1,000,008. Your worth, on your father's current fortunes, something between 2 and 3. Florence Ryder danced twice with the Duke. Therefore tonight you will dance with him 3 times, or your mother will want to know why. Eat something, your mother says, but not the ham. You eat the toast, dry, half of it. The corset decides these things, not you. There is simply no room in your body for both breakfast and whalebone, and whalebone was fitted first. Here is your day, the day of a girl whose family could purchase the state of Rhode Island. At 10, the French master comes, and you conjugate verbs you will use to order servants in Paris hotels. At 11, the dancing master, a small perfumed Italian who holds your gloved fingertips as if they were lit fuses and walks you through the figures of the cotillion while your mother watches from a gilt chair, counting your steps under her breath. At noon, calling hours, you sit beside your mother in the drawing room while a procession of women arrives, each staying exactly the correct 15 minutes, each leaving cards on the silver tray in the hall. One card folded at the corner means she called in person. Cards from a husband mean the family acknowledges yours, and the absence of a card from Mrs. Astor's circle means what it has meant for 20 years. The tray is a ledger. Your mother reads it every evening and enters the results in an actual book. You say perhaps 40 words during calling hours. You have learned the trick of smiling with your eyes lowered, which is called modesty, and of never expressing a preference, which is called breeding, and of turning every question about yourself back onto the asker, which is called charm. You are, by the standards of this world, exquisitely educated. You can converse in French, sketch in watercolour, play Chopin badly and Schumann worse, and identify the precedents of every rank in the British peerage: Duke, Marquess, Earl, Viscount, Baron, in that order, drilled into you like catechism. You cannot do arithmetic beyond the household kind. You have never read a newspaper cover to cover. When your father's railroad men were shot at during the Pullman strike last year, actually shot at, actual men actually dying over the wages that built this room, you learned of it only because you overheard the butler. Your ignorance is not a failure of your education. Your ignorance is your education. A girl who knows things is a girl who might form opinions, and a girl with opinions is damaged goods on this market. The way a horse that bites is damaged goods, no matter how fine its legs. At 2 o'clock comes the drive. The carriage, a maroon brougham, the coachman and footman in maroon livery with silver buttons bearing a crest your mother invented, purchased really, from a genealogist in London who found, for a fee, a connection between the Slades of Nowhere and some omnigerous Slades of Somerset. The carriage takes you up the avenue and into the park, at a walk, in a slow parade of other carriages doing exactly the same thing, so that everyone can see everyone, and everyone can see who bowed to whom, and who cut whom, and whose daughter sat beside whose son. It is not a drive, it is a stock exchange conducted at 3 miles an hour. And today, on the drive, it happens. A Victoria comes the other way, dark green, perfectly turned out, and in it sits Mrs. William Backhouse Astor Jr., the Mrs. Astor, the keeper of the list, a heavy-faced woman in black silk with a diamond on her breast the size of a chestnut, and your mother beside you straightens by perhaps 1/4 of an inch, and inclines her head, the precise, practised, dignified bow she has been rehearsing for 2 decades. And Mrs. Astor's gaze passes over your carriage the way a gaze passes over an empty stretch of water, not hostile, worse than hostile, unregistering, as if the maroon brougham and the invented crest and the $4 million and your mother and you did not exist at all, had never existed, were a gap in the air. The 2 carriages draw level and pass and are gone. Your mother's face does not move. Her gloved hands stay folded in her lap, but you are close enough to see the kid leather tighten across her knuckles, and you understand with the queasy clarity of a child watching a parent be struck that this has happened before, that it has happened for 20 years on this same drive in this same park, and that every single time some part of your mother dies quietly where no one is allowed to see it. And you understand something else, watching those white knuckles. You understand what you are for. You're not going to marry a duke because your mother is cruel. You're going to marry a duke because your mother has been drowning her whole life 3 feet from shore, and you are the plank, and a drowning woman does not ask the plank its feelings. The carriage rolls on. The park is beautiful. The elms are bare and black against a sky the colour of oyster shell, and the frozen bridle path glitters, and none of it is for you. "Tonight," your mother says quietly, eyes forward, "you will wear the white satin and my pearls." That is all. That is the entire declaration of war. Now let me tell you about the man you are being aimed at, because he has a history, and the history matters, and nobody's going to tell it to you, so I will. His name is George Fitzwilliam Vajra, 9th Duke of Rexford. He is 26 years old. He owns, on paper, a castle in the north of England called Harcliffe, with 180 rooms, a house in London the size of a hotel, 23,000 acres of farmland, moor and village, and the patronage of 11 church livings, which means 11 vicars pray for him professionally. He also owes, at this moment, something in the neighbourhood of £400,000. Call it $2 million. His grandfather borrowed against the land when land was worth something, Then the 1870s happened. American grain, grown on prairie that cost nothing, hauled on rails your own father laid, shipped in steel hulls at freight rates that fell by half, and then by half again. American grain landed in Liverpool cheaper than English farmers could grow it in the next county. English agriculture did not decline, it caved in. Rents on the Rexford estates have fallen 40% in 20 years. The roof of Harcliffe's Great Hall, a roof the size of a parish church, hammer-beamed 500 years old, leaks in 11 places, and every winter the leaks multiply, and a roof like that costs more to repair than the entire estate now clears in 2 years. The Duke did not cause any of this. He inherited it at 19 when his father dropped dead at a shooting party, and with it he inherited a mother, the Dowager Duchess, and hold that name somewhere cold in your mind because she is coming, who informed him, over his father's coffin more or less, of the one duty remaining to him. There is no money in England, she told him. The Rothschilds' daughters are spoken for. You will go to New York. And so he has come to New York the way his ancestors went to war, reluctantly, expensively, and to seize an inheritance. He is not a monster. Remember that too, because it would be easier if he were. He is a tallish, quiet, sandy-haired man with a soldier's moustache and beautiful manners and eyes that never quite finish arriving at whatever they look at. He would rather be at Harcliffe shooting grouse. He finds American voices loud, American food excessive, and American heiresses interchangeable, and he is here to select one the way a man selects a bank. And the thing is, the terrible ordinary thing is, he does not think of this as cynical. He thinks of it as duty. 400 years of veins look down at him from the walls of a hall with a ruined roof, and he is going to save that roof, and the girl attached to the money is a detail of the transaction, the way the paper is a detail of the banknote. You will spend years learning what I have just told you in 4 paragraphs. Some of it you will learn on your wedding night. Some of it you will learn from servants' faces. The last of it you will learn from a locked drawer in a desk in a cold room, but we are not there yet. Right now it is 7 in the evening, and Bridget is dressing you for the ball, and this time the corset goes tighter. Hold the post, miss. You hold the bedpost, both hands. Bridget braces and pulls, and the world narrows, and you count the way you have taught yourself to count. Not to 10. 10 is not enough. To 30. While your ribs are drawn in past the point your body believes possible, and the blood roars briefly in your ears like a shell held to both of them at once. 18 inches tonight. For a duke, 18. Then the layers. Chemise, corset cover, 3 petticoats, the last one silk taffeta so that you will rustle when you walk. The rustle is deliberate. It is the sound of money moving. And then the gown itself, white duchesse satin, the skirt so heavy it must be lifted over your head by 2 maids, while you stand with your arms up like a diver, and it descends around you with a whisper and a weight like a slow wave. 11 pounds of it, cool as pond water against your arms and then warm within a minute, holding your body's heat against you, a soft upholstered prison you will carry until 2 in the morning. The bodice is boned again on top of the corset's boning, so that from breastbone to hip you're cased in 2 nested shells. And when you sit, you have practiced sitting. You lower yourself with your back straight as a plank, because bending at the waist is no longer among your body's abilities. Then the pearls. Your mother brings them herself, which she does perhaps 3 times a year, and stands behind you at the glass and lays them at your throat. 3 ropes, cold as a dead man's fingers for the first shocking second, and heavy, genuinely heavy, 1.5 pounds of the Indian Ocean strangled into a necklace. In the mirror her eyes meet yours over your own shoulder. "You're the handsomest girl in New York," she says. It is the nicest thing she has said to you in a year, and it is not a compliment. It is an appraisal, a jeweller saying the stone will pass. Long white gloves to above the elbow, 16 buttons each, done up with a silver hook because fingers cannot manage them. A fan of white ostrich, a dance card, ivory, with a little pencil on a silk cord, hanging at your wrist like a manacle scaled for fairies, and down the marble stairs, carefully the satin gathered in one fist because girls have broken ankles on these stairs. A Schermerhorn girl broke a collarbone in '92 and missed a whole season and might as well have died. And into the carriage, and up the frozen avenue, iron and stone, gaslight and breath fog, to the Hartleys. You hear the ball before you see it. Every window of the Hartley house is lit, 40 windows of gaslight and the new electricity together, so that the whole limestone front glows like a stove, and there is an awning of striped canvas from the door to the curb, and a red carpet on the actual pavement, and either side of the carpet held back by policemen. A crowd. A crowd. This is the part they leave out of the storybooks. 200 or 300 ordinary New Yorkers standing in the January cold. Shop girls with shawls over their heads, clerks, newsboys, women holding children up, standing for hours in weather that hurts, to watch you walk 15 feet from a carriage to a door. The newspapers print the guest lists and the crowds come the way they come to a fire. As your carriage door opens, you hear a woman's voice, quite clear in the cold. "That's the Crane girl, the railroad one. They say 2 million. And a second voice, younger, not unkind, just hungry. "Look at the pearls, Lord, look at her pearls. You're 17, and your face is famous and your price is public, and you've never spoken to a single one of these people in your life, and you walk the red carpet between the two banks of staring eyes, with your head at the angle your mother's voice set years ago, and the cold hits your bare collarbones like water, and then the doors swallow you into the heat and the light, and the sound of the crowd is cut off behind you as cleanly as a door closing on weather. Inside, gardenias. The Hartleys have stripped the greenhouses of 3 states. The staircase is roped with smilax and white roses. The air is thick and sweet and hot as a conservatory. And underneath the flowers, faintly, always, the smells no one mentions. Melting candle wax, cigar smoke drifting from the smoking room, and the animal warmth of 400 people in silk and broadcloth, wearing scent because nobody bathes as often as their descendants will pretend. At the head of the stairs, a footman with a voice like a coastal cannon announces you into the roar, "Mrs. Augustus Crane, Miss Crane." And 400 heads turn, not fully, nothing so vulgar as turning fully. 400 heads incline by 4 degrees, and 800 eyes take your measure in a single second of practised flicker. The satin, the pearls, the waist, the face, the mother. You feel it land on you like a fine net. Somewhere across that ballroom, being talked at by 3 matrons at once, stands a sandy-haired Englishman with a distracted expression, and he has not seen you yet. He will. A ballroom in 1895 is a machine, and like all machines of that age it runs on heat, pressure, and human labour you're not supposed to notice. The heat first. Gas jets and 2,000 candles and 400 bodies in a room built for show, not ventilation. Within an hour, the temperature at head height is that of a June afternoon. Women faint at these balls. Genuinely, regularly. It is so common there is a room set aside for it, with a sofa and smelling salts, and a maid whose whole evening is spent unlacing the fallen. The fainting is not delicacy. It is physics. Take a girl who has eaten half a slice of toast since morning, remove a third of her lung capacity with whalebone, stand her in 90-degree heat, spin her, and see what happens. The corset does not just shape you for the market, it softens you for it. A creature that cannot breathe, cannot run. The pressure next. Every mother in this room is armed with a daughter, and every daughter is armed with a dance card, and the card is the battlefield. A full card is triumph. Gaps in a card are visible. Men can see when they glance at the ivory leaves whether you are wanted, and a girl with an empty card sits against the wall on a small gilt chair, smiling a smile that costs more effort than coal heaving, while the room politely declines to look at her. There are girls at this ball, sweet girls, pretty girls, whose entire evening, whose entire season, whose entire lives will be spent on those chairs, because their fathers are worth only 200,000, and everyone knows it to the dollar and the labour. Behind the palms and the smilax, the house is a furnace room of work. 40 extra staff hired for the night. Footmen who have been polishing since dawn, whose white gloves hide split knuckles. A chef and 11 undercooks who will send up at 1 in the morning a supper of terrapin, canvas-back duck, foie gras in aspic, and a pudding structurally reinforced with spun sugar, a supper costing roughly what each footman earns in 2 years, and the footmen will carry it and stand at the walls with their eyes at the regulation middle distance, hearing everything, seeing everything, existing by mutual agreement of everyone present, not at all. You know none of their names. There will come a night, years from now, in another country, when servants' names are the only names you know. Your card fills in 9 minutes. It always does. The rider girl's fills too, across the room. You can see the small white flash of it going hand to hand. Then the room does that thing rooms do. A current, a leaning, a rearrangement of attention like iron filings when the magnet moves. And Mrs. Hartley herself, gardenia-scented, upholstered in violet velvet, is at your mother's elbow with a stranger in tow, and her voice performs the sentence it has been rehearsing all week. Mrs. Crane, Miss Crane, may I present his Grace the Duke of Rexford. Close to, he is taller than you expected and older around the eyes than 26. The moustache. The evening clothes cut in London, which fit in some quiet way that American tailoring you suddenly see does not. He bows over your hand, does not kiss it. English of his sort never do, that is a French vulgarity, and says in a voice pitched below the room's roar so that you must lean a half-inch toward him to catch it. Miss Crane, I'm told your father builds railways. Mine collected clocks. I suspect your father has the better of it. It is a joke. It is, you will realize much later, very nearly the only joke he will ever make to you. But it is a joke, and you are braced for a monument, and so you laugh, a real laugh, one beat of it, before your training catches it and trims it. And something in his never quite arriving eyes arrives, briefly, and looks at you. 200 people are watching this introduction while pretending to discuss the weather. Your mother has gone very still beside you, the stillness of a woman at a roulette table watching the wheel slow. May I, he says with a glance at your wrist, and takes the little ivory card and writes his name. G. Rexford, small, backward sloping, in 2 of the empty lines. 2. A pause. And then, unhurried, in a 3rd. 3 dances. The room's temperature seems to rise 1 further degree. Somewhere to your left, a matron says something behind her fan to another matron, and across the ballroom Florence Ryder, who is genuinely lovely and has genuinely done nothing wrong, looks at her own card for a moment, as though it has changed weight. You dance. A waltz first. His gloved hand at your waist rests exactly where the whalebone is, so that he is holding not you but your armour, and through 2 layers of kid and boning you can feel nothing of each other at all, which is the whole design of everything. He dances correctly and without pleasure, the way a man signs documents. Over his shoulder the room revolves. Gaslight, gardenias, diamonds, the wet gleam of 400 pairs of eyes, and he asks you the questions of the interview. Do you ride? Do you shoot? No, of course. American ladies don't. Do you mind the cold? The north of England is cold. Harcliffe, he says, and for one moment his voice changes register, drops its guard by a fraction. The hall is 15th century, he says. The roof timbers are chestnut cut before Columbus sailed. When it rains hard, you can hear it through the whole house, like the sea. He is telling you, if you could hear it, everything. He is telling you what he loves, and what is broken, and what you are for. But you're 17, and his hand is at your waist, and a duke has danced with you 3 times in front of all New York, and the champagne you are allowed, 1 glass, is doing its small warm work, and what you hear instead is like the sea. At 2 in the morning in the carriage home, your feet throbbing in their satin shoes, the pearls lying on your collarbones like a sleeping animal, your mother looks out at the passing gas lamps and says, "To the window," in a voice you have never heard from her. Young, almost frightened, almost soft. 3 dances. And then she says nothing else the whole way home, and that silence is the loudest thing you've ever heard her say. You go up the marble stairs at 2:30. Bridget is awake. Bridget is always awake, has been awake since 5:30 this morning, will be up at 5:30 again, and she unbuttons the 16 buttons of each glove and the long spine of the bodice, and unlaces you, and the moment the corset opens is the moment I want you to feel, because every woman of this age knew it, and none of them wrote it down as it deserved. The stays part, and your ribs swing outward like a door unlocked, and the first full breath goes down and down into places that have been sealed since morning, and it aches. Actually aches, a bruised, spreading, glorious pain, and the grooves in your skin, red-purple, patterned like basket work, will not fade until you sleep. Bridget rubs your stripes with witch hazel. Her chapped hands gentle, neither of you speaking, the room smelling of witch hazel and cold ash and dying gardenias, and outside a milk cart is already somewhere on the avenue, iron and glass, the first sound of the working morning arriving before you have finished with the night. You sleep, and the machine does not, because now the second courtship begins, the real one, the one you will never see, and it is conducted between your father's lawyers and the Duke's in offices on Broad Street on paper. Let me show you the arithmetic they will never show you, because you are the only figure in it that cannot read the ledger. The Duke's men open with the debts, £400,000 against the estates to be cleared in full, plus the roof, the drains, the home farm, the London house. Call it another 150,000 in repairs. Plus, and this is the part that would stop your heart if anyone told you, an income. An annual allowance settled on the Duke personally for life, secured against American railroad stock, whether the marriage is happy, whether the marriage is warm, whether the marriage is anything at all. They ask for $50,000 a year. Your father's men counter. Your father did not build 11,000 miles of track by paying asking prices. They offer the debts and 30 a year, and they demand things back. That the settlement money be held in trust, that a portion be secured on you and any children, that the Duke cannot simply pour it down the same hole his grandfather dug. The Duke's men express in Victorian legal English that this is rather ungentlemanly. Your father's men express in reply that so is bankruptcy. It takes them 3 weeks. The final figure, and figures like this were real, this is the going rate. Consuelo Vanderbilt's Duke got $2.5 million in railroad stock plus $100,000 a year for each spouse. It was printed, and the whole world read it. The final figure for you is $2 million in first mortgage bonds, the debts cleared, and $40,000 a year to his grace. In exchange, one daughter, 17 years old, delivered in white, $2 million in 1895. A skilled workman, a mason, a machinist, earns perhaps $600 a year. Bridget earns $200, with room and board under the leaking eaves. Your price is 3,300 working men's years. It is 16 Bridgets working since before the pyramids. Nobody asks you. But here is the stranger thing, the thing you must sit with in the dark. Nobody asks him either, not really. The dowager's letters arrive weekly from England, and you will read them one day, years too late, and find sentences like instruments of surgery. The Rider girl's fortune is reportedly smaller and the mother impossible. The Crane girl will do. Conclude it before Lent. The Crane girl will do. While the lawyers work, the courtship performs itself in public, because the public part must exist for the private part to be respectable. He calls at the house 5 times in February, each visit logged by the footman, each visit reported in town topics within 48 hours, because someone in your own house is selling the information, and your mother knows it, and pays Colonel Mann anyway, and everyone pays. That is the system. He sends flowers, orchids, which say expense, never roses, which say feeling. He sits in the pigeon's blood drawing room making conversation of a smoothness that could be poured from a jug, while your mother presides and you answer, and the clock on the mantel, French, gilt, bought, ticks off the correct 40 minutes. You are never once alone with him. Read that again. You will stand before a bishop and vow away your entire life to this man, and the total of your unchaperoned conversation with him at that moment will be 0 minutes. You know his dancing. You know his orchids. You know one joke about clocks. On this, everything. And do you want it? This is the question nobody asks, so I will. And the honest answer, the answer that history should record for you and all the girls like you, is that you half do, and the half is manufactured, and it works anyway. You're 17. You've been raised from the cradle for exactly this as thoroughly as a warhorse is raised for cavalry. And when the trumpet finally sounds, something in the training answers even while something underneath it, some small cold passenger behind your ribs, sits very still and says, "Wait, wait. I have not seen anything yet. I have never crossed a street alone." And at night you lie in the dark under the weight of the eiderdown and try to assemble the Duke's face from memory and find you cannot. You can get the moustache and the never-arriving eyes, but not the whole. And you are marrying him, and you cannot remember his face. And down the hall your mother is awake too, writing lists, happier than she has ever been in her life. There is one evening in early March I have to show you, because it is the hinge, and because a version of it happened to a real girl in a real house on this real avenue. Your father comes home for dinner. Just the three of you, the small dining room, the dead Comte's porcelain, and somewhere between the fish and the roast, apropos of the wedding plans that have begun to fill the house like rising water, you hear your own voice. You had not planned it, your voice simply goes, say, "Papa, what if I would rather not?" The room stops. The footman at the sideboard becomes a piece of furniture. Your mother sets down her fork with a click like a cocking hammer. Your father looks at you for a long moment, and in his face you see, briefly and terribly, that he is not a cruel man either. That is the horror of this whole story, the shortage of villains. You see that some part of him, the part that once carried you on his shoulders through the stables at the Newport house, would like to say, "Then don't, Nellie." But he is a man who has spent 30 years honouring contracts, and the contracts are drafted, and his wife has spent 20 years drowning 3 feet from shore. And what he says, not unkindly, which makes it worse, is, "You'll want for nothing, Nell. He's a gentleman. It's a great position." A pause. He looks at his plate. Your mother knows best about these things. And your mother says nothing at all, because she does not need to, because after dinner she comes to your room, and what happens there is quiet and total, no shouting. Your mother has never shouted in her life. Shouting is for people with less at stake. She sits on the edge of your bed, takes your hand in her 2 cold ones and explains that girls do not know their own minds at 17. She did not. That love, the kind in the novel she removed from under your mattress, is a story invented to sell novels, and marriages built on it end in ways she could name from this very avenue. That everything, the house, the pearls, the 20 years of cards on silver trays, everything has been for this, for you, so that you will never stand in a park and be looked through like a gap in the air. Her voice does not rise once. Her thumb strokes the back of your hand the whole time, a small circular motion, the tenderest she has been with you in years, and it is exactly the motion of a hand gentling an animal that must not be allowed to bolt. And when you begin to cry, quietly, you have been trained even in this. She does not gather you in. She waits it out, the way one waits out weather, and then she says the sentence that ends the discussion for the rest of your life. Every girl cries before her wedding. You will thank me when you're a duchess. Then she rises, smooths the counterpane where she sat, and at the door she pauses, and without turning around she says the true thing, the only fully true thing she will ever say to you about all of it. I will not watch you become me. The door closes, the gas is turned down, and in the dark you understand that it is over, that it was over before it began, that it was over probably in a park in the 1870s, when a heavy-faced woman in black first looked through your mother like glass, and the small cold passenger behind your ribs pulls its knees to its chest and goes silent, and it will stay silent for a long time now. Not forever. Remember, it is there. It is the most important character in this story, and it is going to sleep for about 4 years. The engagement of Miss Eleanor Rutherford Crane to His Grace the Duke of Rexford is announced on the 12th of March, 1895. The New York papers give it the front page. The world prints your portrait, your father's estimated worth, the Duke's acreage, and the rumoured settlement side by side like a racing form. In London, the Dowager Duchess reads the cable at breakfast at Harcliffe, in a freezing morning room, in fingerless gloves, beneath a water stain the shape of Ireland spreading across the ceiling, and says to the butler, this is the whole of her recorded joy, "Tell Hoskins the north roof first." The wedding is set for the 6th of November, St. Thomas Church, 5th Avenue. You have 8 months left in America, and the strange thing, the thing you could not have predicted, is how fast a cage empties of time. The 8 months are a machine too. I'll walk you through what it does to a body, because history remembers the wedding and forgets the manufacture of the bride. The trousseau first. In April your mother takes you to Paris. 6 days on the ocean, a suite on the promenade deck, and even the crossing is work. 2 changes of dress a day, dinner at the captain's table. Every meal a performance witnessed and reported, because there are town topics correspondents on transatlantic liners. Of course there are. The ships are the best hunting in the world. In Paris, the House of Worth, Rue de la Paix, where the great Monsieur Worth is lately dead, but his sons carry on the temple. You stand for fittings 2 and 3 hours at a stretch on a small carpeted dais, arms out, while 3 fitters work around you with their mouths full of pins, and the pins click faintly against their teeth when they speak, and the tape is cold when it circles your throat, and the whole room smells of new silk, a smell like rain on hot stone. You will never afterward smell fresh silk without your ribs remembering. They're building you 60 dresses. 60. Morning gowns, walking costumes, tea gowns, dinner gowns, ball gowns, a riding habit, furs, and the wedding gown itself, which requires 5 fittings alone. White satin again, always white satin, with old Point de Venise lace at the bodice that cost by itself the price of a good Manhattan brownstone, and a train 4.5 yards long, because a duchess's train must be borne, and the bearing of it must be rehearsed. Standing on the dais on the 3rd afternoon, arms out, ribs bound, watching yourself multiplied to infinity in the angled mirrors, you have a thought that arrives from nowhere and never fully leaves again. They are not fitting the dresses to me. They are fitting me to the dresses. The dresses are for the Duchess of Rexford. The Duchess of Rexford does not exist yet. You're the raw material from which she's being cut, and everything of you that does not fit the pattern. The girl who laughed 1 whole beat at the clock joke, the girl who asked her father what if, is the selvage. It gets trimmed. It falls to the workroom floor. It is swept up at night by a Parisian seamstress who earns 4 francs a day and burned. Back in New York, the presents begin arriving in September, and a room is set aside for them, and the room fills like a hold being loaded. Silver by the crate, soup tureens, candelabra, a table service for 36 from your father's business associates, each piece engraved with the Rexford crest, a griffin holding a broken chain, and you learn the crest before you learn the man. Diamonds from your father. A tiara, because a duchess must have her own, made by Tiffany in the English style, and when you first lift it the weight surprises you, nearly 2 pounds, and when you first wear it the weight becomes pain within the hour, a bright circular headache like a hand pressing down, and the dowagers who see you rub the mark on your forehead afterwards smile and say, every one of them, the same words, you'll get used to it. Which is the motto of this entire civilization, and could be carved over its gates. And the Duke? The Duke sails home in June to see to the estates, to spend, in fact, the first tranche of your father's money, already advanced against the contract. The north roof of Harcliffe is stripped and relieved through the summer by 9 men from Sheffield while you are being pinned in Paris, and there is something you should hold on to in that. Your marriage exists, is physically real. Men are walking on it in nailed boots 5,000 miles away. before you've ever once been alone in a room with your husband. He writes to you every fortnight. The letters are 2 pages, in a small backward-sloping hand, and they are courteous, and they are about the weather, the grouse, the progress of the roof, and they are signed yours very sincerely, Rexford, and you read each one 4 or 5 times looking for the door in it, the warm room, the like the sea, and it is never there. You show them to no one. You keep them tied with a ribbon anyway, because a girl has to keep something, and they are, technically, the only letters a man has ever written you. Technically, because there is one other letter, and I have to tell you about it, though it costs something to tell. There is a young man. There is always in these stories a young man, and the reason there is always one is not romance but arithmetic. Put a beautiful 17-year-old at 40 balls a year, and someone unsuitable will fall in love with her, as surely as rain falls on the unroofed. His name does not matter. Call him Harry. Half of them are called Harry. A college friend of your Schermerhorn cousins. Tall, unfinished, heir to a perfectly respectable and perfectly insufficient $300,000. You've danced with him perhaps 12 times across 2 seasons. You have talked with him, at supper tables, under the eyes of chaperones, about actual things. Books, the new bicycles, whether the Brooklyn Bridge sways in wind. It does, he has felt it. And he listens to your answers instead of waiting through them. And that is all. That is the entire affair. It would not fill 20 minutes end to end. In October, 3 weeks before the wedding, he writes to you. 1 page. It says in the upright, unpractised hand of a young man who has rewritten it many times, roughly this, that he knows it is useless and improper, that he wishes you every happiness, and that he could not let you sail without your knowing you had been loved in the ordinary way, for nothing, by someone with nothing to gain. Do not answer this, the letter ends. I only wanted one true thing said to you before Wednesday. You never receive it. Your mother reads all incoming post now. This is not secret. It is policy, announced as calmly as a mealtime. And she reads this one standing by the drawing-room fire, and you will never know exactly what her face did. And then she puts it into the fire, and the fire takes it in the offhand way fires do, and that is that. You will learn this letter existed 11 years from now, from a cousin at a funeral, in a single sentence, and you will have to walk out of the room and stand in a corridor with your hand flat against cold plaster for a while. But that is 11 years away. On this October evening you know nothing. You're upstairs being fitted, arms out, while one true thing said to you before Wednesday goes up the chimney in smoke, and the smoke joins the general smoke of New York, and the city smells the way it always smells, coal and horses and money, and nothing whatever has changed except everything. I want to be careful here, because it would be easy to make your mother a witch, and she is not a witch. She is a woman doing sentry duty on a wall she built with her own life. And from where she stands, that letter was a man with a torch. $300,000. A broken engagement with a duke, the settlement contracts already executed, the roof already leaded. Ruin by every measure her world possesses, and her world is the only world she's ever been permitted either. Somebody sealed her in too once. That is how these walls work. The bricked in teach the bricking. The 6th of November, 1895, comes up grey and still, with the kind of hard pearled sky New York gets before real winter, and it is your wedding day, and you have not eaten since noon the day before, and this time it is not the corset's decision. Here is your wedding morning, hour by hour, because this happened. A version of this happened to a real girl named Consuelo Vanderbilt on this same avenue in this same month of this same year, and she wrote it down decades later when there was no one left alive to punish her for it, and the world owes it to her, and to all of them, to know. 7 o'clock. You wake. No, wrong word. You surface because you have not truly slept. You have lain all night listening to the house, which has not slept either. Doors, footsteps, the dumbwaiter's rope groan, florists' men in the hall at 5 arguing in whispers about lilies. The window shows the grey sky. Somewhere down the avenue they are already putting up the police barricades outside St. Thomas, because the crowd, the papers will count it, the crowd today will be several thousand people, filling the avenue solid from 52nd to 55th, standing 8 deep in November cold to watch a 19-inch waist pass at a distance of 40 feet. 8 o'clock. A tray comes up, chocolate, toast. You drink half the chocolate. The toast returns downstairs untouched and is eaten in the kitchen by a scullery maid, which is the single most useful thing your wedding breakfast will accomplish all day. 9 o'clock. You're put in the bath, scented with orange flower water. Bridget washes your hair and dries it by the fire, brushing, 100 strokes and then another 100. And the fire spits softly, and the brush crackles with November static, and neither of you speaks. And then Bridget begins very quietly to cry. Bridget, who has seen you every morning for 4 years, who is not coming with you, because the dowager has written that an English duchess requires an English maid, and the Irish girl will not do. Bridget cries without stopping her hands, the brush never losing its rhythm, tears simply proceeding down her chapped face in the firelight, and you reach up and take the wrist of the hand holding the brush, and hold it, and for a moment you sit like that, girl and girl, 17 and 21, one worth $2 million and one worth 200 a year, holding on to one wrist in front of a coal fire, and this, mark it, is the most honest embrace anyone will offer you today. 10 o'clock. The dress goes on. 15 buttons of satin at each sleeve, 30 down the back, the point of Venise cool and stiff as pressed leaves at your throat, the train lifted from its muslin shroud by 2 maids like a body from a bed, and laid out behind you across the entire room, 4.5 yards of it, so heavy that when you take your first step you feel it resist, actually resist, like something reluctant, like walking upstream. The veil is a length of Brussels lace, older than the United States, and when it comes down over your face the world goes soft white and slightly grained, like a photograph of itself, and behind it, this is the part the crowds can never see, the part the veil exists to hide. Behind it your eyes are already red, because at 9:30 your composure went suddenly and completely the way ice goes, and you've been crying on and off for half an hour while being dressed by 6 pairs of hands that pretended, every one of them, not to notice. Your mother comes in at 11:15. She looks at you a long moment through the veil. If she says something soft, history does not record it. What she does is practical. She sends for cold water and a sponge, and she stands over you while your eyes are sponged in cold water to take the swelling down. And she says, in the voice she uses for footmen who have dropped things, there will be photographers. And then, one human moment, save it, it has to last you years. On her way out she stops and puts her gloved palm against your cheek through the lace, weightless, half a second, and is gone before it can become anything, and you hear her silks going away down the marble stairs like a tide leaving. 11 o'clock. Your father in the hall, top hat in hand, looking suddenly older and smaller than his fortune, and the front doors open onto a wall of sound. The crowd, the whole avenue of them, a noise like surf with your name in it, and the cold air comes in around your ankles under all that satin, and you go out into the roar on your father's arm with the veil turning the world to grained white silence 6 inches from your face. The carriage, the barricaded avenue sliding past, mounted police, faces, thousands of faces tiered on stoops and hanging from windows, a boy up a lamp-post with his cap pushed back, 2 shop-girls holding each other and jumping to see, an old woman making the sign of the cross at you as you pass, at you or for you. You will wonder for the rest of your life which it was. And St. Thomas filled with 3,000 flowers and everyone your mother has fought for 20 years. The whole 400, because they have come at last. All of them. The wall of old New York has opened for 1 hour. Mrs. Astor herself is in the 4th pew, in black, present, registering you finally and forever. And your mother walks up the aisle of that surrender on the arm of an usher with her face perfectly composed and 20 years of drowning over. And whatever else is true today, whatever else is ever true, know this: it worked. Her plan worked completely. It cost exactly 1 daughter. The organ. 60 voices of the boys' choir. The walk up the aisle takes 4 minutes, and you feel every eye like weather on your skin. And at the top, at the chancel steps, stands the sandy-haired man whose face you could never quite assemble. And here is the detail history actually preserved from the real wedding this one is made of. The detail that tells you everything about both of these children, because he was a child too in his way, bricked in from the other side. As you come level with him and he turns, you see through 6 inches of veil and grained white light that the Duke of Rexford's face is pale and set and strange, and much later you will learn where his eyes had been all morning. Nowhere. He had spent it. The dowager's letters confirm, going over accounts. The bishop's voice. Wilt thou? The words go by like stations passing a train window. Your own voice, when its moment comes, arrives from somewhere just behind and to the left of you, and says I will, quite clearly, and the small cold passenger behind your ribs, asleep these 8 months, turns over once and settles. The ring. The register. You sign Eleanor Rutherford Crane for the last time in your life. Watch your own gloved hand do it. The pen scratches. The ink shines wet a moment. Dries. Done. Mendelssohn. The doors. The roar of the avenue doubling as you come out into the grey light married. And above it all the bells of St. Thomas going full peal. Bronze on bronze. A sound you feel in the breastbone. The same physics of bell metal that has announced wedding since the Middle Ages, ringing out over Fifth Avenue and the barricades and the boy on the lamppost, telling all of New York the thing that is now true. The Crane girl did. The crossing takes 7 days, and it is on the water, somewhere past the halfway point, in the strange steel-smelling limbo between your 2 lives, that the marriage actually begins, and I will tell you what can be told and leave the rest where the century left it, behind a stateroom door. The ship is the Campania, Cunard's newest, 12,000 tons, and your suite is the finest aboard, and none of it matters, because a November crossing of the North Atlantic is a week inside a weather system. The ship does not rock. The ship labours. All night the hull works around you. long groaning flexions of steel, the shudder-pause shudder of the screws lifting half out of the sea and biting back in, and the wind against the deadlight has a note in it, one sustained rising note that you will hear for years afterward in chimneys. You're seasick for 3 days. Your new maid, English chosen by the dowager by post, a silent, efficient woman of 40 named Mrs. Rudge, who addresses you as your Grace, and has, you gradually understand, been sending the dowager a weekly report since Southampton was still head of you. Mrs. Rudge holds the basin and sponges your face with professional detachment, and you find yourself missing Bridget's chapped hands with a violence that frightens you, missing them the way you cannot yet let yourself miss anything larger. And your husband is courteous. He inquires after your health each morning and evening. He reads in the ship's library. He walks the promenade deck in oilskins in weather that empties it, and comes back with colour in his face and salt in his moustache, more alive than you have ever seen him. And it comes to you, watching him at dinner on the 5th night, that you have married a man who is at ease exactly where other people are not. Storms, moors, silence, and helpless exactly where they are at ease, which is to say, anywhere a feeling might have to be said aloud. On the 6th night he tells you, unprompted, over the pudding, that his father never once addressed him by his Christian name. Fact delivered like the weather reports. He seems unaware of having said anything remarkable. You lie awake that night listening to the hull work, doing a sum your education never covered. He is not cold to me. He is cold the way the house he grew up in was cold. It is not aimed, it is climate. You are 18 in December. You will spend that birthday and the next 14 in the climate. Liverpool in fog, the special train north. England unrolls past the glass, and it is beautiful and it is dark. That is the first thing, the darkness of an English November afternoon, night arriving at 4 o'clock like something owed. Hedgerows, stone villages, bare oaks, black in the mist, sheep standing motionless as boulders, everything older than anything you've ever seen, and none of it lit. Coal smoke lies over every town like a lid, and then the train slows at a small station whose sign says Harcliffe Halt. A station that exists, you realise, because the family the train is carrying you to built it, and on the lamplit platform stand 24 people in the cold, the station master, tenants, the vicar of one of the 11 livings. And as your husband hands you down, a small girl is pushed forward to give you a bunch of hothouse violets, and she performs her curtsy staring at you with pure round terror, and you want to kneel down to her, and you feel, physically, like a hand on your shoulder, that a duchess does not kneel on a station platform, and so you thank her from your full height in your American voice, and the violets are cold as coins in your glove. Then the carriage and the dark park. 3 miles of drive, 3 miles inside the gates, oaks going past in the carriage lamp glow like columns in a temple corridor, and then the house. You have seen big houses. You come from the avenue of big houses. You have never seen anything like this, because Fifth Avenue's palaces are 10 years old and pretending to be 500, and Harcliffe is 500, and pretending nothing. An accumulation of grey stone the length of 2 city blocks, battlements and mullions and chimneys like a stone forest, one wing Tudor, one wing Georgian, the great hall medieval at the heart of it, the whole mass crouched black against a sky just barely paler than itself, with, count them as the carriage just swings up the last of the drive, with lights in perhaps 9 windows. 9. out of what will prove to be 340. The house is not lit because the house cannot be lit. There is no gas beyond the ground floor, no electricity anywhere, and lamp oil and candles for a building this size cost real money, and until 8 months ago there was no real money. You're looking at the thing itself now, the thing you were traded for, not the castle in the storybook, the corpse of the castle in the storybook, into which your father's $2 million has just begun, like a faint pulse, to push blood. The entire indoor staff is drawn up in the entrance hall to receive you, 31 of them, a double line under the antler racks and the pikes, butler, housekeeper, footman, housemaids down to the 12-year-old scullery girl at the end, whose hands, you notice, even tonight, even from 20 feet, are the same chapped red as Brigid's. And at the head of the line, in black to the throat, small, upright, with the Duke's own never-arriving eyes set in a face like carved boxwood. "Welcome to Hartcliffe," says the Dowager Duchess of Rexford, and offers you her cheek, which is cool as the violets. And then, before you've spoken one word, she turns to the housekeeper and says, "Her Grace will have the east rooms. The fires have been lit since Tuesday, but she'll find them damp regardless. Americans feel the damp, and that is your welcome, all 3 sentences of it, and 2 of them were about you in the third person, and you have just learned the grammar of the next decade of your life. In this house, you will be discussed in your presence, managed in your absence, and needed only twice, once at the bank and once in the nursery. The east rooms are the size of your parents' entire second floor. The fire in the bedroom grate is bright and utterly beaten. You can stand 6 feet from it and feel the cold of the room on your back like a presence. The walls are a yard thick and hold the chill of 5 centuries the way a cellar holds it, patiently, permanently. The sheets, when you are finally in them, are damp. The Dowager was right. She is always going to be right. It is her single genius. Damp with the particular clinging stone-cold dampness of English linen in November. And Mrs. Rudge has put in 2 stone hot water bottles wrapped in flannel, and you lie between them like a body packed for shipping, listening to your marriage. Because you can hear it now. The wind has risen, and somewhere overhead, far overhead, through floors and attics, the rain has started against the great new north roof, the roof of Sheffield led that 9 men walked all summer, the first thing your dowry ever bought, and your husband told you the truth at that first waltz, the only truth he knew how to give. When it rains hard, you can hear it through the whole house, like the sea. Morning shows you the estate, and I want you to see it clearly, because you own it now, in every sense except the ones that matter. 23,000 acres. From the east windows, the park, deer moving under the oaks in the frost mist. Beyond it, tenant farms, 41 of them, worked by families who have worked them so long that farm and family share names. Beyond the farms, the village of Hartcliffe, 1 street, 1 pub, 1 church with veins in the floor going back to a crusader with his legs crossed. And beyond the village, rising in long brown swells to the sky, the moor, which in November is the colour of a sleeping animal, and sounds when the wind crosses it, like nothing else on earth. A hollow, enormous, grieving hush, the sound the world might make if it were empty. Some mornings you will stand at the window and listen to the moor and feel it saying something to you in a language just below hearing. Some mornings you will have to turn away from it, and the house between you and all of it, and the day of the house, which now closes around you like the corset did, hour by hour, and I will give you 1 day of it, because 1 day is every day. You wake at 8 to Mrs. Rudge and the shriek of curtain rings, and the first breath of the morning is cold enough to see. Washing is a jug of hot water carried up 80 yards of corridor and 2 staircases by a housemaid who rose at 5:30. By the time it reaches you it is warm, not hot. The soap is pears. The towel is huge and slightly damp. Everything here is slightly damp. Damp is the estate's true crop. You dress, worth 60 gowns, hang in a dressing room where mould has to be fought off the monthly like a siege. And you go down to breakfast through corridors hung with 400 years of veins, dark oil faces watching you pass, and every face has your husband's eyes, that whole gallery of never quite arriving, generation after generation, and you understand walking under them that the climate did not begin with the dowager either. It is upstream of everyone. It comes off those canvases like cold off stone. Breakfast, silver chafing dishes on the sideboard, kedgeree, kidneys, eggs, the Duke behind the Times, the Dowager behind her letters, and total silence except the fire, the clink of lids, and the ripping open of envelopes, which the Dowager performs like small executions. Conversation at an English breakfast of this class is not merely absent, it is forbidden by something deeper than rule. You learned New York's grammar in 17 years. You now learn, item by item, error by error, a second one, and the Dowager is your instructor, and her method is the pause. You speak to a footman too warmly. Pause. You admire something aloud. The frost on the park, the age of the hall, with American enthusiasm. Pause. And then, mildly, quite. You ask, in your second week, whether the fire in the servants' hall might be kept in longer in this weather, having passed the open door and seen the 12-year-old scullery girl breathing on her fingers. The pause that follows this one has architecture, has furniture in it, and then the Dowager says, not to you, but to the room. Her Grace will learn that the household has been managed since before either of us was born, and the subject is closed forever, and the child's fingers stay cold, and you have accomplished nothing except to teach the servants that the new Duchess makes trouble downstairs, which, final twist of the key, makes them trust you less, not more. Because here is the discovery of that first winter, the one nobody prepared you for. The servants do not want your kindness. Kindness from you is dangerous to them. It draws the Dowager's eye. It violates an order they live inside far more completely than you do. It costs them and buys them nothing. What they want from you is that you be predictable, distant, and correct. Exactly the things you were shipped here being unable to be. And so for a long time, in a house containing 32 other souls, you are, hear the arithmetic of it, more alone than a shepherd on the moor. He at least has the dog. Your husband hunts 3 days a week in season, sits on the bench as magistrate, walks the farms with his agent and comes alive doing all of it. You see him from windows sometimes out on the land, moving with an ease he has never once had in a room with you. In the evenings you dine. 3 of you at a table for 24, 40 minutes, 4 courses, the silence upholstered now, familiar, almost restful if you let it be. And that frightens you. The almost restful, you feel your own edges being planed to fit it. He is never unkind to you. Write that fairly on the ledger. He is never unkind. He is scrupulously courteous. He is grateful in his sealed way. The estate accounts, which you are not shown, are healthier every quarter. And once, in your first march, walking you along the beck to show you the snowdrops, he told you, in a rush of 11 whole sentences, the history of every bridge on the property, and was almost boyish, and you saw for a quarter of an hour the man he might have been if anyone had ever addressed him by his Christian name, and then the house came back into view over the rise, and you watched it close him like a hand closing window by window before you had even reached the door, and New York recedes. That is the quiet horror under this whole year, the one that works on you at night. The letters from home take 9 days each way, and they thin. Your mother writes weekly at first, then fortnightly, her letters full of the season, of her season, for she is in society now, dining where she was never asked, her 20-year war won on your flank, and reading them you can find, if you hunt, perhaps one line per letter that is about you rather than about the Duchess. Your father writes twice a year, at Christmas and your birthday, short, fond, helpless, with a cheque you don't need. Girls you danced with marry one by one, and their weddings reach you as clippings. Harry, the letter you never got, marries a Philadelphia girl in 1897. You read it at breakfast in a 9-day-old world among the dowagers' small executions, and feel nothing. And then, at 11 o'clock that morning, in the long gallery, under 400 years of your husband's eyes, feel it all at once and stand very still at a window with your hand flat on the cold shutter-fold until it passes. Nobody sees. That is the skill you have now. In New York they trained you to be looked at. Harcliffe has trained you not to be seen, and you are 18 years old, and you have mastered both, and there is no third thing you have been taught. But the nursery, I said you were needed twice, at the bank and in the nursery, and the second summons is answered in the second year. A son, born at Harcliffe in the Big East Bed in September 1897, after a labour of 19 hours during which the dowager waited in the next room, not the anxiety of a grandmother, the vigil of a dynasty, a sentry posted on your body. And when it is over, and the child is a boy, the church bells of 3 villages ring, actual bronze, actual hours of it rolling out over the tenant farms, and men you have never met drink the child's health in the one pub, and the dowager comes to your bedside and looks at the Marquis. He is a Marquis, 4 hours old, Marquis of Rathbourne, the heir's courtesy title. He outranks you asleep in his flannel. The dowager looks at him a long moment, and then does the single warmest thing she will ever do in your presence. She touches his cheek with the back of one finger and says, "Good." One word, one. And you understand, exhausted, torn, 18 months married and 18 days from your 20th birthday, that you have just done the entire thing you were purchased for. All of it. The ball and the settlement and the veil and the crossing. It was all for this £1.50 of sleeping succession. And that everything you do for the rest of your life is, dynastically speaking, appendix. They give you the boy for 20 minutes at a time. He has a wet nurse from the village, then a nanny, then the nursery wing entire, its own staircase, its own staff, its own laws. You may visit. The visits are scheduled, and when at 6 weeks you're found by the nanny at midnight simply standing over the crib in your nightgown, having walked the cold 80 yards of corridor barefoot because you woke needing to hear him breathe, the incident is reported. Everything is reported. And the dowager remarks at breakfast to the toast rack that American mothers are famously excitable, and the nursery door acquires within the week a habit of being locked at night. For the child's security, you're told, you have a second son in 1899, an heir and a spare, the phrase goes. You will hear it said at a London dinner, lightly, by a woman you barely know, about your own children, and you will smile because you have mastered both trainings, and you will go home and stand at a window, and the small cold passenger behind your ribs, asleep since a March evening on Fifth Avenue when a door closed and a gas lamp was turned down, along about here, in the fourth year, in the 2 suns silence of that enormous house, it begins to wake up. It wakes in stages, the way a limb wakes, pins and needles first, and the first pin is a drawer. The winter after the second boy, your husband is thrown at a hedge and breaks his collarbone, and for 6 weeks the estate correspondence comes to the library where he sits strapped and fretting, and one afternoon he asks you, because his mother is in London and his agent is at the far farms and there is literally no one else, to fetch the rent ledger from his desk. The desk is unlocked. The ledger is in the second drawer, and under the ledger is a bundle of his mother's letters going back years, and you are not a spy. You have never been a spy, but your own name is visible on a fold in that small carbon steel hand, and you are human, and you stand in the brown library light and read 4 years of yourself in the third person. The Crane girl will do. Later, she dresses well and breeds well. One cannot ask the Americans for more. Later still, after the scullery fire incident, Her Grace continues to require management. And in the most recent this winter's, a sentence about the boys' schooling that ends the American strain will be got out of them at Eton soon enough. The strain. You put the letters back in order. You carry the ledger to the library. You say nothing that day or ever, mastery of both trainings. But something has torn along a seam, quietly, the way heavy silk tears, and through the tear the passenger puts out one cold hand and begins, for the first time in years, to count what it actually has. And here is what it counts. You are 23 years old. You are a duchess. You have precedence over every woman in England outside the royal family and about 20 others. Footmen straighten when you pass. A village curtsies. You have 2 sons whom you may visit on schedule. You have a husband who is never unkind. You have 60 gowns fighting mould, a tiara that leaves a mark, 340 rooms, and the counting hand closes on it slowly. Not one single thing in either hemisphere that is actually yours. Not the money, settled, entailed, administered. Not the house. It belongs to the 800-year-old idea that also owns your husband. Not the children. They belong to the idea too. You have read where the strain gets got out. Not even your name. The girl who signed the register at St. Thomas signed herself away with the ink. You own, you conclude, standing at the east window above the Frost Park with the moor making its enormous hush beyond. Exactly what Bridget owned. Your hands and whatever they can quietly learn to do. So they learn. This is the turn, and I will not lie to you and call it triumph, because the world you're locked in permits no triumphs, only tunnels. But the real dollar princesses, the actual women, Consuelo and Mary and Maud and the rest, the ones who did not break and some broke, some ended in sanatoria and separations and laudanum, and one, at least, in the North Sea off a ferry rail with no witnesses, and history should say so. The ones who did not break all found some version of the same tunnel, and it ran strangely downhill toward the village, the farms, the cold hands. The Duchess has one unguarded border, and it faces the poor. It starts small, the way tunnels do. The vicar's wife, the only woman within 10 miles allowed to speak to you almost naturally, mentions that the school's roof, everything in this story is roofs, that the village school's roof is bad, and the winter attendance halves when it rains. You have pin money, an allowance from your own settlement. yours by contract to spend on gloves. The school roof costs less than 4 of Worth's gowns. You pay for it yourself, directly, before the estate office can absorb the gesture into its machinery, and you make one condition, learned from your father across a dinner table long ago without knowing you were learning: you will see the accounts. The builder, expecting a duchess's signature and finding a duchess's questions: the price of Welsh slate, wagon versus rail freight, why 9 days' labour and not 7? The builder goes home that night and tells his wife the American knows figures, which is not even true yet, but becomes true, because you send to London for the books to make it true, and no one can stop you, because arithmetic, it turns out, was left off the list of things a lady must not do, only because nobody imagined a lady would want it. Within 2 years you know the estate's real numbers better than your husband does. You never say so. You have learned the deepest grammar of that house at last. Power there is not held. It is stood near quietly, until it leans on you out of habit. When the agent retires in 1903, the new agent, younger, Scottish, unsentimental, discovers within a month where the actual decisions have been pooling, and simply begins bringing the farm question, and the drainage question, and the cottage repair question to the east sitting room at 11 o'clock, and the Duke, who has noticed everything and said nothing, is grateful in his sealed way, because the numbers were always the thing his climate could not do, and now the roofs, 41 farms of them, stop leaking one by one on decisions made by a woman from 54th Street, whom no one will ever officially have put in charge of anything, and the village learns your face. That is the part that would astonish the girl on the dais in Paris. Not love. The English poor do not love their duchesses, they are far too sane. But something with more iron in it. They learn that the school roof held, that the midwife's fees are paid now from somewhere that asks no questions, that the winter the pit closed over at Aldenmore and half the village men were laid off, coal went on being delivered to certain cottages all season by an estate account nobody could quite locate. The scullery girl with the chapped hands, she's grown now, she is second housemaid, is heard to say in the servants' hall that her Grace sees what's in front of her, and in the dialect of that hall, this is roughly a knighthood. You will never hear it said. It will reach you the way everything true reaches you in that house, years late, second-hand, at a strange angle, but the house feels different around you by inches, doors held a half-second longer, fires in your rooms that no longer lose their battles, the great cold machine adjusting itself grudgingly, molecule by molecule, around a fixed point it has decided is staying. The dowager watches all of it. Give her this. She misses nothing, ever. And in 1904, dying, she takes 4 months over it, in the state bedroom, refusing London doctors, correcting the local one. In the last week, when it is only you who sits with her through the afternoons, because her son cannot make himself and there is no one else, and the vigil, after all, is women's work, she comes up out of the morphine one wet March evening, finds your face by the lamp and studies it a long time with the never-arriving eyes, and says perfectly distinctly, "You are better value than we thought," and dies 4 days later without having said anything kinder, because she did not have anything kinder. That was the whole of her stores. And the terrible thing, you will sit with this for years, the terrible thing is that some starved appendix of you receives those 7 words like a decoration. Better value. You cry at her funeral, alone in the family pew's cold corner, and cannot have said, then or ever, for whom. Now, I have to widen the lens because you were never alone in this, and the story owes the others their page. By 1904 there are By the Countess's own counting, more than 100 of you. 100 American heiresses holding British titles, with something over $200 million carried east in your trousseau. A private Marshall Plan half a century early, re-leading half the great roofs of England. And when the London season assembles in May, and you come down from the north to the tall cold house in Belgravia, you find each other. It is never announced. There is no club, no league. There are only certain drawing rooms on certain afternoons where the tea goes long and the voices one by one slide gratefully back into the accents of Ohio and Fifth Avenue and San Francisco. And the talk, chaperoned all your girlhoods, corseted ever since. The talk among the bought brides alone together is the freest talk in England. And in those rooms the ledger of your generation is read out, season by season, and you learn the full spread of the bargain you all made. At the lucky end, Mary Leiter of Chicago, who married George Curzon for love, actual love, it did happen, lightning does strike, and is at this moment Viceroy of India, ruling 300 million people from a marble palace, the highest position any American woman has ever held, and writing home, mind you, letters of bone-deep loneliness even so. Jenny Jerome of Brooklyn, widowed now, whose son Winston is in Parliament being loud and unignorable. Half his engine is her American blood, and everyone knows it. Consuelo, the real Consuelo, Duchess of Marlborough, whose wedding your wedding was cut from, mobbed by crowds who love her, presiding over Blenheim, and privately at the far side of 10 years and 2 sons of her own, moving already toward the thing that will scandalize 2 continents, the separation and eventually the annulment, in whose proceedings her own mother will testify under oath, in a church court for all history to read. I forced my daughter to marry the Duke. I have always had absolute power over my daughter. Alva Vanderbilt will say those words out loud, late, when saying them costs her nothing and repairs nothing, and there is a kind of dark completeness in that. Even the confession arrives like everything else in this world after the accounts are closed. And at the other end of the ledger, spoken lower, teacups down, the ones it broke. The Earl who ran through his wife's entire fortune in 6 years, racecourse, card rooms, other women, then sued her father for more, sued and won costs. The Viscountess whose husband decanted her money and then decanted her to a house in Scotland, visiting twice a year, while London saw him everywhere with a soprano. When she is finally granted a separation the court gives him, this is the law of your world, hold it in your hand, feel the weight. The court gives him custody of her children, because children of the peerage belong to the peerage. The girl from Cleveland, 20 when she sailed, dead at 29 of what the certificate calls exhaustion. The girls who went into rest cures and came out smaller. The girl, she was at your wedding, she wore primrose, she laughed like a bell, whose name the drawing-room stopped saying at all after the ferry, which is how you knew. Married for millions. That was the headline formula, on both sides of the water from the beginning. The American papers ran it proud, and the English papers ran it sneering. But listen to the second half of your own epitaph, the half nobody printed because it took 30 years to come true, forgotten by everyone, because that is the actual end of the story, the quiet one. The wave of dollar princesses breaks with the old century. By the 20s you are period pieces. By mid-century the very houses you re-roofed are coming down. Hundreds of great houses demolished, the lead stripped and sold, the parks cut up, and the guidebooks that walk tourists through the survivors will name the architect, the earls, the battle honours, the clocks, and will grant the American money if they mention it at all, one clause, restored in the 1890s following an advantageous marriage. That is you. That clause is you. 2 continents, $2 million, 31 servants, 19 hours of labour twice, 4 decades of standing near power until it leaned. And history's whole receipt is 11 words in a guidebook with your name not among them. Except that the story is being kept anyway, and here is where it was kept. And I want you to see this room because no historian was ever admitted to it. The still room at Harcliffe, stone-floored, north-facing, where the housekeeper's keys live and the jam is put up. In September the estate's damsons come in, and by a custom now decades old, the Duchess, you, greying at the temples, your hands no longer soft nor useless. The Duchess puts up damson cheese with the housekeeper and the second housemaid on the last Friday of the month. Sleeves rolled, and the copper pan has to be stirred without stopping for the better part of an hour, and the wooden spoon drags heavier and heavier as the fruit goes down, dragging at the shoulder, the steam smelling of hot sugar and stone floors and autumn, wasps at the high window, the housemaid, chapped hands, grown grey herself now in your service, telling over the village's summer, whose boy is off to sea, whose roof wants looking at before the rains, and your forearm aches, and the pan spits and catches you a small bright burn on the wrist bone, the kind that raises its little white blister by evening, and you say a word your mother didn't know you knew, and the housemaid laughs outright at her Duchess in her Duchess's company, easy as family. And this room, this hour, this laughter, this burn, this is the estate you actually acquired. It never appears in any settlement. It is not entailed. No court can assign its custody. It took 20 years of witnessed winters to convey, and it is the only property in this entire story that was never once bought or sold. Your husband, in these later years, is easier too, not warm. The climate does not lift, but weathered in with you, the way 2 trees grown close finally are, shaped by each other's shelter, whatever the original spacing meant. He calls you Nell now, has for years. Nobody recalls when it started. On winter evenings you sit either side of the library fire, he with the game book, you with the farm accounts, 40 minutes at a stretch without a word, and the silence between you, which was once upholstered, once a wall, is now simply the room's other inhabitant, old and known. Once, only once, the night the elder boy leaves for Eton and the house rings hollow behind him, your husband stands a long time at the dark window and then says, to the glass, not quite to you, I am aware it was not what you would have chosen, a pause the length of the whole marriage. I have been aware of it throughout. And he winds the clock and goes up to bed, because 11 sentences was always his ration, and he has spent them, and you sit on alone by the fire, understanding that you have just heard the man's entire confession, apology, and love letter, 30 words delivered to a window pane. And that the strangest mercy of your strange sentence is this: you understood it fluently. You have lived here long enough to be the one person alive who could. And one visitor comes north in the autumn of 1906 whom I cannot leave out, because her scene closes a circle 11 years wide. Your mother crosses in October on the New Mauretania's older sister, first class, alone. Your father died in the spring at his desk, mid-sentence in a letter about freight rates, which was the only way he was ever going to consent to go. And she comes to Harcliffe for 3 weeks, and it is the first time she has ever seen it. Think about that. She engineered your whole life toward this house and never once stood in it. She arrives at the halt on a wet afternoon, smaller than you remember, in magnificent black. And as the carriage takes the 3 miles of drive, you watch her face doing sums at the window, the oaks, the deer, the sheer duration of the approach. And when the house finally lifts its grey length out of the mist, she says nothing at all for a moment, and then she says quietly, "Well, 1 syllable, 20 years of Fifth Avenue in it." And here is the strange discovery of those 3 weeks. The house defeats her. Not rudely. The house is never rude. The house doesn't need to be. But she, who ran a New York palace like an admiral runs a fleet, is at sea in this one within a day. She cannot learn the hours. She's early for everything, which here is worse than late. She dresses the butler with the bright, commanding graciousness that worked on every servant she ever employed, and it lands on his professional deafness like rain on lead. She tries to praise things, the hall, the pictures, the age of it all, with the American enthusiasm you unlearned a decade ago, and hears her own voice go loud against the stone, and you watch her hear it, and you watch her, at 61, meet the pause. The pause you were broken on at 18. She meets it at dinner her second night, having said of the crusader in the church floor that he was simply charming, and the silence that follows has furniture in it, and your husband says mildly, "Quite," and turns the gamebook's page, and your mother, Cornelia Crane, who cut her way into the 400 with your body for a blade, goes faintly pink above her pearls, and looks, for one unguarded second, exactly like a girl from nowhere in particular. You do not enjoy it. That is the discovery inside the discovery. You had thought, in the bad winters, in the third-person years you had promised yourself, that if you ever saw your mother snubbed by this world she brought you into, something in you would feast. And the moment arrives, and there is no feast. There is only an old woman in black being quietly refused by a stone house, and your own hand moving before you decide anything, passing her the sauce she cannot ask for, changing the subject to New York, where she is fluent, and her eyes coming up to yours with a flash of the old command, and then, this is new. This is the spring's grief and the ocean and the pause all together, with something that has never once been in them before. Gratitude. Your mother is grateful to you. The plank has turned in the water and is holding her up. On her last afternoon you walk her to the school, because she has asked. She has heard the village speaks of you, she wants to see. And it is raining the fine wool rain of the north, and the children are singing their tables through the open door, and she stands under her umbrella looking at the Welsh slate you paid for, black and shining, and at the smoke standing up from the cottage chimneys, and she is silent so long that you finally look at her and find her crying. Upright, composed, correctly, the way she taught you, tears simply proceeding down the powder, claiming a nothing, and she says to the school, not to you, "I only wanted you never to stand in that park," and you say, "I know, Mama," and she says, "It cost more than I understood. I understood it would cost. I did not," and stops, because the sentence has reached the edge of what her whole life has language for, and stands there at the edge in the rain, and you take her arm, and the two of you walk back up to the house through the wet gold afternoon, arm in arm, saying nothing. 2 women manufactured by the same machinery a generation apart, and it is not forgiveness. Forgiveness would need the sentence finished, and it never will be. But it is an armistice, and you keep it. She sails in November. You never see her again. The heart takes her in her sleep in 1909, in the marble house, with her name at last in every register that matters, and her rooms full of cards on silver trays. And when the cable comes, you sit with it a long time in the east window, and what you finally cry for, when you cry, is not the mother and not the daughter, but the machinery. The whole vast stupid engine of walls and lists and wastes and thrones that took two intelligent women who might have loved each other easily and made of their love this, a settlement, honoured in full by both parties at ruinous cost forever. Before the tower, though, there are 2 more rooms you must stand in with her, because no account of this life is honest without them, and the first is the most famous room in the world. In the May after your first winter, you're 18 still, married 5 months, this sea barely out of your ears. You're presented at court. Every peeress must be on her marriage. It is not an invitation, it is a summons dressed as one, and the preparation for it makes your wedding look improvised. The regulations are printed and absolute, unchanged in their essentials for a century. A gown with a bodice cut low regardless of the season, regardless of the cold of St. James's, a train exactly 3.5 yards from the shoulders, not the waist, so that it drags with the different, heavier physics, pulling you backward by the collarbones, long white gloves, and on your head, fixed upright so that they can be seen across a room the length of a tithe barn, 3 white ostrich feathers, the Prince of Wales's badge, worn by every woman presented since anyone can remember. You will also carry a bouquet you will never once look at, and a fan you must not open. The rehearsals take a week. There is a woman in London, there are several, it is a profession, who teaches the court curtsy for a fee, in a hired room with a chalk line on the floor for the throne. Because this is not a curtsy as you know curtsies. You must sink in 11 pounds of gown and 3.5 backward dragging yards of train, down and down, until your knee all but grazes the floor, keeping the spine straight, the chin level, the feathers steady, the face serene. And then, this is where girls fail, this is what the fee is for, rise again in one unbroken motion, with no hand offered and no visible effort, muscles alone, as if lifted on a wire from above. Then 3 steps backward, because no one turns their back on the sovereign, 3 blind steps in a train, kicking it aside with a small practice flick of the heel that must look like nothing at all. You practice the flick 200 times. Your thighs ache for days, a deep, tremulous ache like the aftermath of climbing, and you understand the design of this too by now, because you understand the design of everything now. The curtsy is difficult on purpose. It is a physical oath. The body itself is made to spell out the sentence, I am nothing before this throne, and made to spell it beautifully, and the beauty is the point, and so is the nothing. The day itself is a February day moved to May by clerical error, grey, raw, and you wait in the line of carriages in the mall for 2 full hours, because everyone presented waits, duchesses and knights' wives together, the one queue in England that rank cannot jump. The crowd walks up and down the carriage line looking in the windows at the gowns and feathers, frankly inches away, appraising you through the glass exactly as the crowd on Fifth Avenue once did, and you sit still under the inspection with your bouquet dying by degrees in your lap, and the cold of the unwarm carriage gets into the low-cut bodice and settles across your bare shoulders like a yoke of ice. And somewhere behind you, in the line, a girl is being quietly sick. From nerves into a borrowed basin, you can hear it. Everyone in 3 carriages can hear it, and no one will ever refer to it. And her whole life in that world will proceed on the agreement that it did not happen. And then the palace. Staircases lined with yeomen of the guard, halberds and scarlet, faces like Sunday roasts, anterooms of guilt and drafts. Your train carried folded over your left arm until the last doorway, where 2 pages take it and spread it behind you on the floor with wooden wands actually spread it, arranging you like a specimen, and your name goes down the room ahead of you in the Lord Chamberlain's voice, and you walk into the throne room of St. James's toward a small figure in black. Because it is 1896, and the throne of the greatest empire in human history is occupied by a widow of 76, 4 feet 11 inches tall, in black silk and a white cap, who has reigned since before your father was born. Queen Victoria. You have read her name your whole life the way you read the words ocean and winter as a feature of the planet. And here is the planet's feature. Tiny, round, ancient, with heavy-lidded eyes that have looked at 60 years of this room, and you sink, knee, spine, chin, feathers, the wire from above, and something small and cold is extended, and you do the thing you were told. You brush the back of the Queen's hand with your lips, kid glove and old skin and the faint smell of orange flower, and rise and step, step, step backward, flick, and it is over, and the whole of it. The week of rehearsal, and the 2 frozen hours and the yoke of ice has bought you 11 seconds in the presence, and you never once heard her voice. But here is what you carry out of that room, and it is not what the etiquette manuals promised. Going backward through the doorway, you catch one last sight of her between the feathers of the woman after you. A very old woman on a chair doing her 11 seconds over and over, hundreds of times, all afternoon, all rain, and the thought arrives with the force of heresy and the calm of plain fact. She is in it too. The most powerful woman on earth, and her day is more scripted than yours, her mourning more policed, her body more discussed, her marriage was arranged, her children were dynastic instruments, and she's been on duty since 1837. The cage goes all the way up. There is no room above the rooms. You make your 3 blind steps into the anteroom and stand while the pages fold your train back onto your arm, and you're 18, shivering in cut silk, and you've just had, in the throne room of St. James's Palace, the single most levelling thought of your life. The second room is smaller, and it comes 5 winters later, and it smells of beeswax and evergreen. Christmas at Hartcliffe is not the private festival you knew. It is a public office. On the morning of Christmas Eve, the great hall, the hammer-beamed one, the one the roof was saved for, is opened and fired for the only week of its year, 6-foot logs in a fireplace you could stand up in, and the heat climbs into that 500-year-old chestnut ceiling and loses the fight magnificently, so that the hall is roasting at the hearth and arctic at the door and every temperature of the last millennium in between. And into it, at 2 o'clock, comes the estate. All of it. The 41 farms, the village, the mill, the school, tenants in their church clothes smelling of camphor and byre and cold air, children polished to violence by their mothers, staring up into the roof timbers with their mouths open exactly as children have stared up into them since Agincourt. Trestle tables the length of the hall, beef and goose and bread and beer, ham for every family to carry home, and a tree, German fashion, the Queen made it English, a tree 20 feet tall, cut on the estate, candled with real flames, with a footman standing by all afternoon holding a wet sponge on a pole, which is the entire fire brigade, and nobody thinks anything of it. And the Duchess gives out the presents. That is the office. Every child on the estate by name, from a list you now draw up yourself in November, you know the names. That is the change the years have made. You know that the Aldenmore Tullys had a new baby in September, and that the Smith's middle girl is clever and should have a book, not a doll. Every child comes up the hall to the tree and executes the bob or the bow their mothers drilled, and receives the parcel from your hands. It takes 2 hours. Your feet die inside your shoes on the stone floor by the second one. Your smile is real for the first 40 children and manufactured for the next 40. And then, somewhere past the 80th, something gives way, and it becomes real again in a different register, wearier and larger, and your hands, taking parcels, giving parcels, steadying a toddler who bows so hard he staggers, your hands are doing the only unambiguous good they will do all year, and they know it, and there is a plain animal happiness in it that no ballroom ever came near. And at the end, when the hall is emptying into the blue snow dusk, torches going away down the drive in strings, a farm wife you have known 10 years. She lost a son to the fever in your 3rd winter. You sat in her kitchen then, uselessly, because it was the only thing you could think to do, and she has never mentioned it since. She stops in the doorway with her ham under her arm, and looks back down the great hot golden ruinous hall, and then at you, and says, "It's kept another year then, your grace." And you say, "Yes, it's kept." And she nods, once, the way the north nods, a whole cathedral of meaning and half an inch of chin, and goes out into the snow. It's kept. The hall, she meant. The roof. Christmas. The year. The bargain. All of it. Everything this story is made of. Kept. Another year. And that is the North's entire liturgy of praise. And standing in the doorway in the cold with the candle heat at your back, you find it is enough. You find it has somehow become the thing you work for. There is a day I have been saving, and it belongs here, near the end, because it is the highest ground in the story, in every sense. It is an October afternoon in 1910, and you climb the tower. Hartcliffe has one true tower, the old one, Norman at the base, from the first castle that stood here before the house grew over it like coral. 111 steps, stone, spiral, each tread worn to a shallow bowl by 8 centuries of feet, and the stairwell smells of cold stone and pigeons and time, and the rope handrail is furred with age under your palm, and by the 60th step your breath is loud in the drum of the shaft. You are 42. The corset is long since loosened to sanity, but 111 steps is 111 steps. And then the low door, and the latch cold enough to bite, and you come out onto the leads into the wind, and England lies down all around you. The park first, gold and rust, the oaks going over, deer in the bracken like dropped stitches. The 41 farms, every roof sound, smoke standing up from their chimneys in the still cold air like a fleet at anchor. The village, the school with its Welsh slate dark and wet shining from morning rain, the church tower where the crusader sleeps with his legs crossed, the holt where a small girl once handed up violets. She has 3 children of her own now in the cottages by the beck. The beck itself stitching silver through it all, and beyond everything rimming the world the moor purple-brown and enormous, making its hush. Directly below you, so far down that the gardeners crossing it are the size of this sentence's commas, the great north roof spreads its acres of lead silver-grey, 16 years old now, and good for 100 more, and you stand at the parapet in the wind looking down at the first thing your life ever bought, and you do the accounting one last time, the way your father would have, both columns, honestly, paid, a girl, her New York, her Brigid, her name, one letter she never read, the ordinary loves, the chance of the ordinary loves, 30 years of a climate no one should be raised in and no one should be shipped to, paid in full, up front, without her signature. Received. This. Everything visible from this tower, weatherproofed. 2 sons grown straight who came back from Eton with the strain not, in fact, got out of them. The elder argues with his father about land reform at dinner, in your flat prairie vowels of all things, and you keep your eyes on your plate to hide their shining. A village that is warm, a staff that is fed, a husband translated late into a known language, a still room, a burn scar on a wrist bone, 7 words from a dying enemy that you have never managed to throw away. And the wind comes off the moor and crosses 23,000 acres and arrives at the tower and goes through you like a long, cold cord, and you find that you cannot say, standing on the highest point of everything you were traded for, you honestly cannot say whether the bargain was monstrous, or whether it was, in the end, in some way that shames every party to it except you, kept. Both. It was both. That is the true finding, and history can have it. It was both, all the way down, in every marble house on Fifth Avenue, and every leaking castle in the shires, monstrous and kept, cruelty and roofs, your mother's white knuckles and the smoke standing up straight, from 41 warm chimneys. You were sold, and you made of the sale something no one who sold you had the imagination to intend. Both of those are permanently true, and neither one forgives the other, and you are done. You decide it right there on the leads, in the wind at 42. You are done asking them to. You go back down the 111 steps slowly, one hand on the third rope, and the bowl of each tread receives your foot the way it has received feet since the Crusades. And at the bottom, the ordinary day is waiting. The agent at 11, the vicar's wife at 4, damsons if the frost holds off. You step out of 800 years of stairwell into it without ceremony. That is where I will leave her days. Leave your days, because you have been carrying them all night. What remains is only the evening of it, and evenings we know how to do here. Let's do the last one together, gently, and then I'll let you sleep. It is a November night at Harcliffe. Any November night, years on. The house is settling around you the way stone houses settle, with small ticks and sighs in the cooling walls, a sound like the building thinking. The last doors have been locked. You heard the butler's round go past, the measured tread, the soft concussions of bolts, an entire ceremony of enclosure performed nightly since before America existed. The fires are banked. In the nursery wing, long empty now. The wind tries the shutters and gives up. Somewhere below in the kitchen passages warmth is still moving. A kettle, a low voice, the night's last small industry, and it comforts you obscurely, as it has for 30 years, to know the house is never entirely asleep beneath you, that the great cold creature keeps a warm pulse somewhere down in its dark. Mrs. Rudge is long retired to a cottage by the school. The maid who brushes out your hair now is the granddaughter of a tenant, and her hands are gentle, and the brush crackles with November static, exactly as it did by a coal fire on 54th Street a lifetime ago. 100 strokes and then another 100, and you close your eyes into the rhythm of it, and the 2 rooms lie down on top of each other. New York and Harcliffe, the girl and the Duchess, and for the length of the brushing there is no distance between them at all, and no ocean, and nothing lost, only one continuous woman being cared for by kind hands in firelight, which was, perhaps, the whole of what any of it was ever supposed to be. Then the lamp is turned down, the bed is warmed, stone bottle still, flannel wrapped. Some technologies are already perfect. The sheets are cold for a moment at the edges, the way they always are, the way they always will be, and then your own warmth makes its small country in the middle of them, as it has every night of your life, in every house, on both sides of the sea. Listen, the rain is starting. Far overhead, through floors and attics, on acres of good Sheffield lead, the rain is starting, and you can hear it through the whole house, exactly as a nervous young man promised you at a waltz when the century was still the old one, like the sea. It was the truest thing he ever said, and it took you years to hear what it was. Not a complaint about the roof, an offering, the only beautiful thing he owned, held out across a ballroom to a stranger. When it rains hard, you can hear it through the whole house. You can hear it now. Let it come then. Let the rain cross the moor in the dark and find the roof and settle in for the night. That long, grey, unhurried sound with no edges in it, the sound of weather being kept out, which is the oldest lullaby there is. Every warm bed in history has lain inside that sound. The tenant farms are inside it. The village is inside it. The girl with the violets grown and sleeping and her children, and the housemaid with the chapped hands, grey now, warm now, all of them lying tonight inside the same long sound of rain on sound roofs, and every one of those roofs is the far, transformed end of a white dress, and a 19-inch waist, and a girl who cried behind Brussels lace, and she could not have known, and it does not excuse anything, and it is still, at the end of all the accounting, a gentle thing to fall asleep inside. The fire ticks lower. The stone walls hold what they hold. Your breathing is slowing now. You can feel it. That lengthening, that softening at the edges of thought. The day's weights being set down one by one somewhere behind you in the dark. The names, the figures, the letters answered and unanswered, all of it laid down on the hall table of sleep for the morning to sort. You are warm enough. You are safe enough. You have done enough. You have people who are glad you exist, and a roof that holds, and a bed in the middle of the rain, and that is more than the marble houses ever promised anyone. And it is enough. It is enough. It is enough. Centuries will pass. They are always passing. They were passing that night too. The great houses will fall or become museums. The corsets will go into glass cases and children will laugh at them. The ocean liners will become photographs. The 400 will become a footnote, and the footnote will misspell half their names. The last person who ever curtsied to a dollar princess will grow old and die, and the guidebooks will keep their 11 words, and the tourists will move through the long gallery under the never-arriving eyes checking the time. But rain on a roof will still sound like the sea. People will still lie awake in the dark of enormous cities, priced and measured by machineries they never chose, wondering if there is any version of the bargain where something of their own survives it. And they will still on good nights find the answer this story found, that what is yours is what you make in the cold with your 2 hands, and no contract on earth has ever managed to convey it away. Some things don't change. The human heart doesn't change. The need for rest at the end of a long day, that doesn't change either. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way the tide took the ships from the Narrows, slowly, and then all at once, and out beyond the lights. Let the rain keep its long grey word. Let the house settle and the fire tick and the moor make its enormous hush over everything, over Harcliffe and Fifth Avenue and the whole drowned century, over the girl in the white dress and the woman on the tower, both of them safe now, both of them done. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. You've earned this rest. All of you have, all the way back. Take it, and dream of whatever dreams may come. Good night.